走到地方，呜呜，嘣嘣嘣嘣嘣嘣嘣嘣嘣，然后我的 commander，嘣，然后就哇。
The Ukrainians have captured two Chinese nationals as part of the Frontline. The Chinese nationals made a press statement or gave a press conference last night where they said that the Russians had actually tried to fire chemical weapons at them to stop them from being captured. And the Ukrainians said they had to go and rescue them to stop them succumbing to this attack. A lot of this is probably information warfare, but it doesn't surprise me that there are Chinese nationals fighting alongside the Russians. The one thing that the Chinese military do not have is combat experience. So they will be using every opportunity to embed Chinese troops at every level with the Russian troops so that they can learn about what operating in real combat situations is like and take that back to the People's Liberation Army as part of their training. So I don't think Russia has necessarily got thousands of Chinese recruits that are in there, but Russia is heavily recruiting foreign fighters from around the world. It's running out of troops from at home. It can't sustain the losses it's getting. It's losing 12 to 1,800 troops a day, and it can't get enough through its recruitment pipeline. And we're seeing that, and we know the level of desperation because Russia is relying on North Korea. We've had foreign bodies come in from North Korea. We know of Russian recruiting activities, and when I say recruiting, this is forced recruiting in Africa, in Libya, and elsewhere where there's Russian influence. The Wagner group operating throughout Africa is heavily involved in recruiting African nationals to get them up into the Russian military. And of course, we've seen Houthis coming in from Yemen as well. So that all suggests that Russia is in an even more desperate position manpower-wise than we'd expected. And this just complements its desperation in equipment capability and ability to manufacture its own ammunition. So Russia is not in a good place at the moment. The Russians don't have the logistic support to be able to provide the necessary food, water, clothing, medical assistance, and everything else, which is why morale is exceptionally low. And Russian commanders are exploiting that. So I think that just emphasizes the statements that we've heard from Russian captives and other foreign fighter captives that the Ukrainians have got. 100% what they're saying is lining up with what we're seeing on the ground. I would expect the Chinese soldiers to come out and say that they were lied to. Whenever they came in, they volunteered to go and fight for or to be part of the Russian military, but on a different basis. They will have been told to say that by the People's Liberation Army. They will do everything they can to deny that they have been sent there by the Chinese state to learn about what conflict is like, and they'll have their cover stories. And this is almost certainly part of the cover stories that they're putting out. But the stories that they're telling about the conditions on the front line, about the lack of information coming through, about being given disinformation as to why they're there, what they're doing, and all the rest of it, matches with everything else we're hearing from other captives. I don't think they will ever be allowed back into China again. If they do, the Chinese state will want to remove them as an embarrassment, and therefore their lives are at risk. So they're going to have to be taken away and hidden somewhere at some stage. The consequences for China, the international community should be calling China out for its direct involvement. But two individuals are probably not enough. And those are two individuals in the public domain. We don't know what the intelligence agencies are aware of. President Zelensky said that there were 155 Chinese individuals operating in Russian forces. 155 is not very many at all. And I suspect there's significantly more than that, but it's a very exact number. We don't know where that came from. So overtly, I think everyone is just trying to ignore it and hope that nothing else happens. I think behind closed doors, people will be raising questions with Xi Jinping in Beijing. If the Americans aren't doing it, then the rest of NATO countries and regional powers will be doing it. We don't quite know what Donald Trump's doing at the moment. It's very difficult to put a number on how many foreign mercenaries are fighting for Russia. We know that North Korea brought in several thousand. We know that they have sent possibly several thousand more, but we don't know whether they got to the front line. How the recruiting efforts have gone through Africa, through Libya, through the Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen, and other parts of the world, again, it's very difficult to assess. But certainly we are in the, if you add them all together, tens of thousands, but I'd say low tens of thousands at the moment. Well, Russia's in real trouble. It's real trouble from its access to military materials. So that's ammunition, that's military vehicles, that's missiles. It's relying on other countries to supply those high technology. So it gets its high tech from China. It gets its missiles from Iran and from North Korea. It's starting to get heavy equipment from North Korea. It's getting its ammunition from North Korea. And we do know that Russia's casualties are at such a rate that they cannot sustain them with what they're recruiting through the normal recruiting mechanisms that they have. Of course, the Russians constitutionally are not allowed to use conscripts on the front line, but there's an awful lot of pressure being put on conscripts to sign permanent contracts, and then they can be used in the front line. And Russia has just gone through its latest conscription phase. But it's not in a good position. It cannot sustain the losses it's suffering at the moment. The Chinese state will. I would be very, very surprised if they weren't aware of Chinese citizens that were answering Russia's recruitment. This is recruitment call. This is something that Russia will put out as part of their cover story, but they almost certainly will be using TikTok and other social media, Telegram especially, to get messaging out into lots of different countries around the world, trying to encourage people to come and join the Russian military. They'll be offering huge sums of money for compared to what people can earn in those different countries as an incentive to come in, knowing full well that with the casualty rates, the chances of Russia actually having to pay that money out to them or to their families is very slim indeed. I don't think this exposure is going to create a recruitment crisis for Russia at all. It'll create further international tensions as the international community deals with, China deals with North Korea and deals with other countries that are supplying troops up into Russia. What it's showing is that this is not just a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. If we're getting troops from other countries coming into the front line, then those countries are becoming complicit with what Russia is doing. This is widening the conflict in a way that is not good for the international community. Well, Trump blaming Zelensky for it's not stopping the war. He actually accused him of starting the war. And this is where Trump's illogical approach to everything has come to the fore again. Zelensky didn't start the war. Vladimir Putin started the war. And Vladimir Putin started it in 2014, whenever he first invaded Crimea. In fact, he started the information campaign preparing for that as far back as 2003. And he carried out this full-scale invasion just over 3 years ago. Why Donald Trump doesn't recognize that, why he's not calling it out in plain English, it's not clear at the moment.